Hi, I'm Donna Farhi, and I'd like to talk with you today about how one of the most common yoga instructions can destroy your sacroiliac joints. Now, I've been hearing this instruction for at least 20 or if not 30 years, and I travel all around the world, and I still get students who've been told that when they're in a wide stance standing posture, that they should try and keep their hips square to the front. Now, your pelvis has 3 bones, but they're meant to be stable. This is the hub of your body, grand central station. Everything coming up through your legs has to get transmitted through this hub to the spine, and the weight of gravity coming down through your spine needs to be transmitted through this stable hub down into your legs. So first off, you want to start thinking of these 3 bones as one unit, not 3 separate parts that you can pull apart depending on the movement that you want to do. Now, in a wide stance, standing posture, so Melissa, if you could demonstrate. When you have your feet wide apart, almost always there'll be one leg that has to turn out 90 degrees and the other will turn out turn inwards, 20 or 30 degrees inwards, so that the knee can align to the foot. Now, if you've been told to keep your hips square to the front, I'm going to ask Melissa to do this briefly. If someone's told you, some well-meaning but misinformed yoga teachers told you to keep your hips square to the front, 3 things will happen. The first thing that'll happen is that the head of the femur will turn backwards like this behind the pelvis, which is terrible for your hip. The second thing that'll happen is your knee will twist inwards. Well, even without having to know anything about sacroiliac anatomy, there's nothing good that can come from twisting your knee inwards, especially during a transition. And the third thing that'll happen is the front of your SI joint's going to get pried open on this right side, and it's going to get jammed in the back of the joint. So you're starting to leverage into your SI joint through insisting on having the hips square to the front. Now, if you do this often enough, especially if you do a lot of flow classes, you'll slowly erode the health of your sacroiliac stability. So Melissa, now if you can come back to your preparatory position. And when she turns her leg out now, she's going to commit her knee to her foot and commit her femur to the knee to the foot. And you'll see that the pelvis has had to organize itself around the leg, right? Not the other way around. The legs shouldn't be organizing themselves around the pelvis set square to the front. Now we can test this. When Melissa bends the knee now, if I push against the shin, she's very, very strong. You can see a clear connection from this front leg through the bridge of her pelvis to her back leg. Then if she tries to get the hips square, and there she goes, femur goes behind, knee twists inwards, I don't really want to press very hard on this at all, because what we've got is a house of cards. Now, worse yet, maybe you get, again, some well-meaning teacher who says, now, pull this knee backwards, and at the same time they come around and pull your hips square to the front. If you have a teacher, and do come on back to that correct position, yeah, and then push off to come on. If you have a teacher who's giving you that adjustment, just ask them to stop, and I would say if the teacher isn't willing to back off, then you might want to be rolling up your mat and looking for a new instructor. So really, really important. It's very true for all standing postures, not just warrior pose, not just side angle, but for any posture where you're turning one leg outwards 90 degrees and the other leg inwards, your pelvis is going to have to reorient to the rotation of the front leg. A really cool way of starting to think about the forces that play on your sacroiliac joints is to think about the 3 levers on that joint. You've got your spine and your head, which is a very long lever, and the 2 femurs and legs, which are also very long levers and weighted levers, and how these levers can create shear force against the sacroiliac joints themselves. Now, your sacroiliac joint is held together by a fortress of ligaments, and those ligaments are reinforced by very strong core muscles that together create this tight fit within the sacroiliac joint itself. Now, in an ideal world, your femur and your ilium should be differentiated. So what I mean by that is that when we move, whether it's walking, whether it's in a yoga posture, is that the femur should have an easy, clear motion in flexion, in extension, internal, external, adduction, abduction. It should be able to move freely within the hip socket in a healthy range of motion. If that becomes restricted, it could begin to leverage into the SI joint. When the femur and the ilium are no longer differentiated, then they start to move as one, such that this long lever of my femur is now become one with the ilium and potentially could begin to pry the SI joint open on that side. So one of the common movements that's taught in yoga classes, often in our very first beginning level class, is lying supine in Supta Padangusthasana, or supine, holding the big toe pose. And a great way to get a feel for this is that if I were to do this posture standing up, when I brought my leg into flexion, I'd have to stabilize through my core, and then as I open the leg out to the side, it would show me the true degree of pure movement of the femur within the pelvis as an independent, stable unit. You can see I can't really rotate that far. I don't have a lot of external rotation. But you can see that there's a particular vector to that external rotation. Now, when we lie on the floor, what often happens for students, because they no longer have the onus of balancing, is they're working with a very floppy core, and they'll come into flexion, usually with a yoga belt. So you can put the yoga belt on your foot, Melissa. And they'll do something that they couldn't actually do if they were standing up. They'll let the leg fall directly out to the side. And you can see she's doing something that if I tried to do it, if I were standing, I'd literally either have to turn my pelvis or I'd fall. And at a certain point in this movement, you can see her whole pelvis on the left is getting lifted up, and the weight of that femur is literally starting to stretch the sacroiliac ligaments open. So, terrible thing to do passively lying on the floor. If we work with a little bit of core engagement here and then turn the leg out, we'll see that the toes are pointing in this direction, not directly out to the side, but they're finding that vector that's natural for Melissa. If she follows that now and only goes as far as she can, keeping her pelvis stable, you'll see it's a very, very different orientation of movement. Now she can make this easier for herself by bringing the other leg up and matching the angle of the two thighs. A great little test here is whether or not Melissa could even just let go, and hold that leg there. So she's got switched on core, just as I might have to have a switched on core standing up here to hold the leg out to the side. Now she's starting to differentiate the movement at the level of the femur within the hip socket, rather than the femur and the ilium becoming one, and the differentiation happening at the level of the SI joint. And this is true in almost any movement that you might open your hip. We want to differentiate that movement at the level of the hip socket and not involve or destabilize the SI joint. Now, over the last several decades, flow and Ashtanga and other forms of sequenced practice have become hugely popular. And often in these flow sequences, there's a very common mechanical error that people make that they don't necessarily link to intermittent or even chronic SI problems that develop later. When you walk, you'll notice that when you walk, your feet don't track as if on a railway track. Your feet actually fall slightly towards the midline, so that as I push off from my foot, that force can move into my hip. So you're not going to see too many sprinters or Olympic runners who run down the finishing line with their femurs going off the line of their hip side to side. And that's pretty much a good description of how people can make the transition from the mountain pose to the lunge to their standing posture. Now, this isn't the exception to the rule. I would say about 50% of the students I work with, including experienced teachers, make this common mechanical error. So let's have a look at it. Melissa's going to demonstrate starting in mountain pose. And so far, so good. She'll lunge back with her left leg. Now, I'm going to use the yoga belt to drop a plumb line from her sitting bone in this case, which is kind of approximately the same line of where the head of the femur is. And you can see that that D-ring at the end of the belt is pretty much in line with her front heel, which is what we want. So if she were sprinting, getting ready to sprint off the sprint block, this is what she'd want to be connecting to. Now, here's where things go belly up. When we make the transition, I'd say about 50% of the time, people swing the femur off that line, they turn the knee inwards, and they torque through the lower back and the SI joint. So come on back here. Usually they do this because some well-meaning but misinformed teacher told them to try and get their hips square to the front. So in prioritizing getting the hips square to the front, what happens? The femur moves off the line. Now, even if you didn't really care about your SI joint, that movement is going to twist and rotate your knee while you're in a transition, so it can potentially be incredibly damaging to the ligaments and the surface of the knee joint. So, as you make the transition, make really sure, and maybe I'll use the belt again to show how Melissa is now going to keep her femur exactly where it is, and then using the stabilizing muscles of her hip, she's going to transition into warrior pose. She's allowing the left side of her pelvis to come slightly forward so that when she looks down now, her knee is tracking over her foot and her femur is connecting through to that heel. Now, really important, when you make the transition back to the lunge, keep that femur in line with the heel and lift and come over the femur back into the lunge. So we can make that mechanical error both in coming into the standing posture and in coming back to the lunge. So take the time to slow down your transitions, to work on your strength and accuracy when you're practicing a flow sequence such as this. Now, helpful to know that the primary tissue that holds your sacroiliac joint together are ligaments, and the Celestial Design Committee has given us a veritable fortress of ligaments to hold this joint together in the front, in the back, and of course we have regional core muscles that amplify that support for the joint. But there is one muscle that attaches directly to the sacrum, and that's the piriformis. So we have a look inside here. The piriformis attaches to the anterior portion here of the sacrum, and it goes through the greater sciatic foramina and attaches to roughly to the top of your hip, to the greater trochanter. And one of the actions that it contributes to is the external rotation of your hip, and to some degree abduction as well, but the external rotation of the hip. And that's one of the main clues that we have for whether or not someone might be having issues with the piriformis, is that they might stand with one leg turned out. So just in standing position, one leg might be slightly turned out, or both legs might be slightly externally rotated. So in a moment, I'll show you a simple yoga practice that you can do to lengthen and release the piriformis without twisting the sacroiliac joint. Now, many of the piriformis releases that you'll see that are offered in physiotherapy tutorials and so on involve quite deep rotation or leveraging using the hips. And this way of working stabilizes the SI joint so that we're not creating more of a problem here while simultaneously releasing the piriformis itself. Melissa's going to demonstrate this really simple practice for releasing the piriformis, and it starts by lying in constructive rest position. And if you could bring your right leg in towards your chest, Melissa, and belt around the ball of the foot, coming into supine big toe pose. So far, so good. Now, often when people want to release the piriformis, they go into internal rotation, but they do it in such a way, maybe bringing the leg all the way across the body, that it's creating a deep rotation into the SI joint, or worse yet, they bend the knee and bring the knee across the body and push the knee down to the floor, which is going to destabilize the SI joint if it's already a little wobbly. So in this rendition, we turn the leg inwards, and Melissa, if you could wrap the belt around your wrists and then take hold of each end, and we'll move the belt down to the heel. Hang on there, down to the heel. So that as she pulls on the belt, she's anchoring the femur back into the pelvis. And then we often think by bringing the leg a little further in, we're going to get more out of it. But with this one, if you come back of 90 degrees, turn the leg inwards just to where it's comfortable, and then ever so slightly bring the leg across the body, and then rotate the other leg inwards to match the rotation of your right leg. And then stay there for 11, 12, 13 breaths for about a minute. It can feel very strong, surprisingly strong sensation of release, not just within the deep external rotators of the hip, but along the fascial line through here on the lateral line of the leg, which can get very tight, especially people who do athletic activities like running. Good, and then when you come out of the posture, just come back to neutral, and then flex the knee in towards the chest. If you're wanting to explore more information about how you can practice safely, how you can do your yoga practice safely in terms of your sacroiliac health and stability, please join me with YogaUOnline for the course Keys to Maintaining Sacroiliac Stability.